Hi everyone, I'm Brian Reynolds, co-founder and co-CEO of Trey Athletes. Welcome to the panel. Today I'm joined by my co-founder and co-CEO, Rebecca Feickert, TXV Venture Capital Fund co-founder and partner, Marcus Stroud, and speaker, author, and professional basketball player, Batuli Kamara. Our panel is generously hosted by the 2020 bigBANG conference, where the theme of this year's event is Equity in Action the Next 100 Years. Over the next week, bigBANG 2020 will explore topics critical to racial, gender, and economic equity in our communities. The evidence of long-standing discrimination in our nation is clear. In the first half of 2020, the largest civil rights action since the 1960s began against the backdrop of a global pandemic that disproportionately affects communities of color. And in the same year, the country marks the centennial of the 19th Amendment and 100 years of women's suffrage. The format of our discussion will include a 45-minute moderated conversation focusing on racial equity in sports and the role of athletes as social influencers. This event is presented by Dallas-based youth sports nonprofit Trey Athletes. At Trey, we believe in the power of sports, both on and off the court or field. It's our mission to empower athletes to be leaders, role models, and influential voices for their communities. Through workshops that incorporate former college and pro athletes as mentors, Trey teaches high school athletes how to first build an identity outside of sports and apply skills from sport in their lives. Second, prepare for college and explore careers through job shadows. And third, give back to their communities through service learning projects. Trey also creates a community and programming for the parents and guardians of Trey athletes in order to help them raise healthy, well-rounded, successful kids. When Trey athletes realize their potential far beyond the court or field, only then will we realize the true power of sports. With that, let's start with a few introductions. Today, we're talking with Rebecca Feickert. Rebecca is a tax expert turned social entrepreneur passionate about using sport for social good. Originally from a rural North Dakota town of fewer than 100 people, Rebecca leveraged a homemade highlight film into a full basketball scholarship at the University of Kansas. There, she earned a bachelor's and master's in accounting as a first-generation college student. After graduation, Rebecca obtained her CPA license and gained 6 years of experience in New York, Switzerland, and Bolivia, working in public accounting, private equity, and sport for development. In 2014, Rebecca was shocked to realize that many of her athlete peers were struggling emotionally and financially in life after sport. Determined to help athletes avoid the same fate, Rebecca moved to Boston to attend Harvard Business School. While earning her MBA, Rebecca became obsessed with understanding and solving the problem of competitive athletes failing to realize their full potential. After over 2 years of research and solution testing, Team Trey's efforts culminated in the 2018 launch of Trey Athletes, a nonprofit leadership development program specifically designed for high-potential high school student athletes. Rebecca resides in Dallas, Texas, where she currently serves as a presidential leadership scholar. Welcome, Rebecca.
Thank you for having me.
Next up is Marcus Stroud. Marcus was raised in the small town of Prosper, Texas. He accepted an offer to play football at Princeton University, where he played all 4 years and earned his bachelor's in religion. After Princeton, Marcus began his career in New York, working as a fixed income analyst. He then moved to Austin, Texas, where he worked for a multi-billion-dollar asset manager focusing on private equity and hedge fund structures. Marcus was then recruited to take over the Clubhouse Investment Club, a venture group of celebrities and athletes looking to co-invest with premier venture firms. At TXV, a Texas-based venture capital fund he co-founded, Marcus focuses on health, wellness, and software investments. Marcus is an officer of the Princeton Club of Austin, a board member of Trey Athletes, and he was recently selected as one of the youngest executives to the prestigious Dallas CEO 500 for 2020. Welcome, Marcus.
Thanks for having me.
Third, because we do everything in threes here at Trey, we have Batuli Kamara. Batuli is an international and TEDx speaker, ESPYs honoree, children's book author, professional basketball player, and scholar. Whew. Batuli earned a bachelor's in sports management and a master's in sport for peace and development from the University of Connecticut, where she and her team earned 3 Final Four appearances with the UConn women's basketball team. Prior to UConn, Batuli played for Kentucky, where she and her team earned a appearance, and she is now playing basketball professionally in Spain, where she's joining us today. Batuli has gone on to create opportunities for young girls around the world with her NGO, Women and Kids Empowerment, WAKE. WAKE is a nonprofit geared to educate, equip, and empower young girls through sport, education, and social entrepreneurship. She has organized 10 basketball camps in 8 different countries with over 890 participants in planned sports activities and life skills workshops to increase awareness and break down barriers that young girls face in society. Welcome, Batuli.
Thank you so much for having me.
As discussed, today we'll cover a few questions regarding the importance of role models and social influencers through sport. We'll dig deep into a discussion around the current dynamics of race in sports. And most importantly, we'll talk about how athletes in particular can leverage their platforms to be, quote, more than an athlete and create widespread positive change. So to start, let's go way back. For our first question, we'll focus and then open it up to the rest of the panel. We talk with our Trey athletes constantly about the importance of learning from those who you admire and look up to. Marcus, who are your role models or mentors as a kid? And given the age-old adage that if you can't see it, then you can't be it, can you talk to us about the importance of relatable, representative role models?
Yeah, I was fortunate growing up in a place like Prosper. Prosper is home to a ton of well-known athletes like Deion Sanders, Torrey Hunter, Emmitt Smith. And so, being able to grow up around guys like that was just insane, and it was just special. And so for me, I look up to Torrey Hunter a lot, just because more than, being a mentor and a family friend of mine, he was a very successful businessman, and he was just a good husband and a good father. And so, being able to, live with him my senior year of high school and just learn from him and hear the phone calls he would have with, some of his, business partners, or, hear kind of how he communicated with his teammates. That was just so cool for me to see as a young guy. And his best friends were guys like David Ortiz and Gary Sheffield and all these incredible baseball players. And so being able to kind of have access to those guys also, and just seeing their world, it was just really, really cool and special. And I think another guy who I looked up to, who served as an inspiration for me when I was younger, but now is a mentor for me on a professional level now, is a guy named Shaun Alexander. Shaun was an incredible running back for the Seattle Seahawks, won the MVP in 2006. And I think for me, he was probably the most influential mentor and person I looked up to in my life, just because he was everything I wanted in my life. From a professional perspective, where he's successful, but more on the personal side of things, where he has an incredible marriage, he's an incredible father. And, those are the things I really, kind of look for in having those athletes who represent kind of everything you want in a macho athlete, if you will. Was just so special for me as a young kid.
Full package. Batuli, what are your thoughts on that? Who are your role models and mentors as a kid?
I am so thankful that I had an incredible mentor who stepped into that position, and it was official. And I remember she made me sign a contract, and it was my first basketball coach. And she was just someone who just lived her life authentically, really supported me throughout that journey and in such a holistic way. And I'm so thankful that she never worked to change me, but to show me that everything that I had and who I was who I was meant to be, and how that was honing into my power and just connecting to younger people down the line. And I'm so thankful for that, and the way she advised me through that. And then making it professional. This is a relationship, and this is how you build relationships. And that has carried on throughout my entire life, not just having friendship, but this a relationship, and how can I bring my best to the table if we're gonna be in this.
That's awesome. Rebecca?
So my first role models and mentors were my older sisters. I was an accident. My mom would say I was a blessing, but my sisters are 7 and 10 years older than me. So I started off kind of as their baby doll, and then they became, real role models for me on and off the court. They both played sports, including basketball, and I wanted to be just like them. Sometimes I think I followed them around when they wish I wasn't following them all the time, but I wanted to do everything they did. And so they really inspired my first love for the game of basketball, watching them play, when I was in elementary school and they were in high school. And then I think I very quickly realized coming out of high school that I needed to find mentors. As a first generation college student, both my sisters went to college, but my parents hadn't walked that path. And so I often felt lost about how to make decisions, big and small. Everything from, I think I wore jeans to my first job fair because I didn't realize that you were supposed to dress up. I had no idea where to go to buy a suit. So, simple things like that, but even bigger decisions about what to major in or what career development really means and looks like. And so it would be unfair to mention any one mentor because I've had so many for each different phase of my life who have stepped in and helped me find my own path, not dictate it for me, but show me how they made their decisions and then help me find my own. So very grateful for that. And I think it is so important, especially if you don't have that representation in some form or fashion, to find someone who can fill that role for you in some way.
That's excellent. I think that one of my big takeaways from hearing y'all's responses is this idea that mentors and role models can really come from anywhere, and it's truly a choice that's it's a path that we choose to walk. So I think that even segueing that into fast forwarding to today, you're all accomplished with these incredible feats both on and off the court or field, all three of you. And this next question, I'll start with Rebecca. There's a statistic that we quote pretty regularly in our work at Trey Athletes that 73% of kids look up to and emulate an athlete as one of their primary role models, second only to their parents. So my question is, when did you first realize that you are a role model, and how did that impact you?
So the first time I really realized that I was a role model was sort of an unlikely situation. I was in a very small school. I had 15 people in my high school and 2 in my high school graduating class, and most of us were related. And just like any school, there are different groups of kids and kids who, kind of fall into a different level of, hierarchy or popularity. And our school was no different from that, despite being unique in other ways. And there was one time where I was in the lunchroom eating lunch. The entire school ate lunch at the same time because we could. And after we were done, kids would go into the gym and kind of pal around, do whatever. And I heard some of the kids say something about playing some sort of game, and it didn't make any sense. And they walked into the gym, and I finished shortly after, and I walked in after them. And I realized that the game that they were playing was they would all pretend to shoot around. And then there was one kid who was kind of bullied. And at the same time, when they yelled a word, they would all turn and throw their basketballs at this kid. And I got really mad and, kind of attacked these boys and made them stop, and they listened to me. And I think that was the first time I really realized that because I was an athlete, I had a certain level of respect and status in the school. And therefore, what I said really mattered. And it wasn't even so much that I needed to do the right thing all the time in terms of my own behavior, but that my responsibility also extended beyond that into making sure that our school had the kind of culture that it needed to have for everyone to be themselves and to be safe and to be valued. And so I think that was really the first time I realized the power that I had, and it both scared me and also, excited me because I realized that it was a type of power that not everyone has.
Patuli, what was it like for you when you first realized that you are a role model?
That was such a powerful story. And I think the older I've become, I've definitely experienced.
I think Patuli froze for just a minute. So while we wait on Patuli to come back, Marcus, I might kick it over to you if that's all right.
Sure. Yeah, I think for me, I was not the athlete that Rebecca or Patuli was. I was not like, I was a great athlete, I was a great football player, but I never viewed myself as like the guy. We had some really, really, really big time recruits on our team. And so I was always the nerdy guy who was also really a pretty good athlete. And so I never really viewed myself as a role model from a sports perspective, just because like my mom had raised me that like, sports are like last on the list. You are a great student first and everything else like last. And so it was hard for me to ever view myself as like a role model in sports. And then I think one day my senior year of high school, a mother came up to me and said, my son has been watching your games every Friday night, and he tries to get down in the same stance you get down in Pee Wee. And he watches, and he does it outside the stadium after the game. I was like, really? Like, wow, I'm not that good. That's pretty awesome. But that was kind of the first time I saw tangibly, hey, you have an opportunity. And then a couple of years later, another mother reached out to me on LinkedIn and said, hey, both my boys have been following you since high school. And they are just very impressed with your accomplishments at Princeton and whatnot. And, they'd love to have calls with you every quarter if that's okay. And they just want you to be their mentor. And I was like, dude, I'm a sophomore in college. Like, what? Like, you want me to be a mentor? And I think finally in my professional life, what I've seen when we launched the fund, we did a story on NBC Press here out in San Francisco. And we got a lot of like feedback from that. And then one day we got to the office and I had a letter and it was titled San Quentin State Prison. And I was just like, San Quentin State Prison? Like, if you grew up playing like Grand Theft Auto as I did video games growing up, San Quentin was like one of the worst prisons in the country. And it was from an inmate. And the inmate had written us a letter saying, I saw you guys on TV and, I've been in jail for 10 years now and I'm going to be out soon. But, hearing your story, hearing things you guys invest in, it encouraged me to see young Black men in this space doing really cool things with the pedigree you guys have, especially being behind bars. And so I keep that letter on my desk every day now because, it's like you never know who you touch by just simply being present and by doing that. And so those are my three instances, I guess I learned that, your role is bigger than sometimes what you think it is.
That's incredibly powerful, Marcus. And Rebecca, I should have mentioned you. Thank you so much for sharing that story as well. Batula, you're batting cleanup now. We lost you there for a second, but excited to hear your response as it relates to what it was like for you realizing your power as a role model.
Yes, I just want to echo those sentiments. Those are two incredibly powerful stories where you take a step outside of yourself and just realize how much of a unique position we are in as athletes. And for me, I would say there was kind of the letters that came in and young girls who began following me and DMing me and saying, I started playing basketball because of you as a Muslim woman. I felt the confidence and the courage to do so, and that I didn't have to separate two and I could be myself. And initially in my heart, that was I think the budding process of it. Like, wow, the things that I do and who I am is bigger than me, and giving a voice to the voiceless. But I would say there was really a specific moment when my younger sister decided to go to boarding school. And she was going for her first interview, and she's 16. And I always say when kids are at the age, I think their brain cells go to a distant planet and come back shortly after. And I always felt this deep sense of hurt because I always wanted to be that for her. And I never understood if I was connecting with her. I speak to her every day. I send her text messages, and then you get this overwhelming amount of direct messages from young girls all over the world, from India to France to doing these basketball camps. But I feel like it's different when it comes from your home. And I wanted her to play basketball, and she's like, that's not my road. And I'm like, okay, I support you in that. And we went to boarding school, and she went to the interview. And as I'm listening to her in the interview, I'm like hearing myself. and I couldn't believe it. And I'm looking over it, and we finished the interview, and we're in the car ride back. I'm like, Aisha, where did you learn that from? She said, I watch everything you do. And it wasn't until I put the guard down and I wasn't the perfect sister and I was just myself. And she's like, I watch everything you do. Thank you. And that was the moment. That was the moment where I was like, she listens to me. and it felt really good because that's what I want to be. I want to be real, and I want to be a great big sister to her. And that was an amazing moment.
You continue to make her proud, and you're giving me chills over here. That's incredible.
I know, right? Wow.
So if it's okay, I'm going to start off with Batuli for this next question, and we're going to try to dig just a little deeper regarding racial equity in sports. We've all seen how college sports especially can open many doors. I think all four of us have also seen how it can close them as well. Specifically, more than half of all college football and basketball players are Black. Yet, thanks to Dr. Sean Harper's research at the University of Southern California, we know that almost half of Black college football and basketball players will not graduate from college, and those rates are up in recent years. Further, despite the fact that 50 to 75% of college football and basketball players believe they will go pro, only 2% actually do. So instead of reaching their potential, many of our friends have become statistics. Can you talk about your experience, Batuli, as a college basketball player and how your experience was impacted by race?
I am so thankful that I had two college experiences, and they were drastically different, going from Kentucky, where I didn't know you could have a culture shock in America, to then going back to UConn. So we say went from grits to oatmeal. But even honestly, it changed my life. But even through that experience, I would say there was a stark contrast when I was at Kentucky, and again, great institution, but from being she's Black to an athlete. And I think, some athletes in the past have said it, I'm not this, I'm not Black, I'm this, and that was one of the moments where it was really a step back when you're treated drastically different. No, you are different because of X, Y, Z, when I can't separate the two of where I go home from and the communities that I belong to and that I represent on a larger scale. So for me, navigating as a college athlete was very unique, especially when you go to a PWI in the Northeast, and now you're back at UConn. And one of the ways that we were able to support one another was being a president of an organization called Collective Uplift. And we would work and come together, and we would focus on Black student athletes, particularly football players, just to create safe spaces for them to identify outside themselves. And the first question we would ask is, who are you without speaking about your sport? Okay, well, if you say you're a great big brother, how many times do you call your family? How do you then hone into those skills? If you're a great football player and you're honing into this 40 hours a week, how do you then take the next step to say who you are without your sport, to now practicing on those skills and developing that, but just getting outside of the mindset and really recognizing who you are. And it's just an interesting line of constantly running into people who are like, I will support you, and I understand that you're a Muslim, but don't look Muslim. Do not be Muslim. But I know that you are, but don't do that, And it's very interesting because it's this kind of tug of war of the heart where I love you and I love how you play and I love what you do, but why do you have to represent it? Why do you have to, make me choose? And it's like, you don't. This is who I am authentically, and this is why sports is the best arena to do it. So I'd say it has been drastically different for me navigating first as a student of color and then as a Muslim woman in sport.
That's really, really powerful, and we appreciate you sharing that story too. Marcus, I'm going to kick it to you for the same question.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think in high school, definitely was a little. This question is definitely easier to answer during the high school experience because I'm from a 3A small country town in Texas. Well, it was. Now Prosper is a booming suburb. But I think growing up, I definitely saw kind of, what it was like to be a Black man on a football team in a all-white town. And there are certain expectations of you. You should be the one doing this. You should be the one doing that. And, how folks view you as just another football player, and I hated that stigma so much that I tried to shy myself away from football because I hated that stigma. That, because I'm this big brother and I should just walk around like that and that should just be my MO. I hated that so much that I was like, no, I'm gonna be as big of a nerd as I possibly can be with mock trial and student council and all this other stuff. Just because I hated that stigma, because I thought that was exactly what America wanted for professional athletes, to fit into this little kind of hole, if you will. And I never wanted to fit into a hole. For me, sports was always a means to an end. That's why, like, when people talk to me about sports, I'm like, I was not Rebecca or Batuli. They were absolutely disgusting on the courts. That's why they played at UConn and Kansas, you know what I mean? But for me, football was just simply a means to an end, because I knew that by being a good football player, I could afford myself more opportunity as a Black man in America by using my talent on the field, apparently my talent in the classroom. So when I got to Princeton, it was a cool experience for me, because Princeton, you're an athlete second, for real. Like, they don't care at all. I mean, we had like 2,000-3,000 people at the game on a good day, and so, like, and I'm sure y'all got that when y'all were playing like out of conference games. And for us, so as a Black male at a place like Princeton, I didn't really, and this sounds so weird to say, but I didn't really see race, if you will. And I would get destroyed by my classmates if they heard this. And I'm sure some of them will hear this, but I didn't see race because, number one, a football locker room, I would say more than any other locker room, is a melting pot for real. You know, you got guys from, you know, North Dakota, you got guys from Wyoming, you got guys from Louisiana, you got guys from, you know, Western Pennsylvania, you got guys from New Jersey. So you don't really see race. You just see, is this person a good person? Is this person a good teammate? Does he work his butt off? That's kind of what we saw. And so race was never something that I really thought about through my 4 years at Princeton. And I feel guilty about that now because it's like, wow, what about my other classmates that may have actually saw race? You know, what about my other classmates that may have felt that, you know, they weren't given a fair chance or they experienced some sort of prejudice because they were a Black person who was playing squash or a Black person playing lacrosse. And so that's kind of been my experience, I guess, with race as it pertains to sports. Now, I would say in my profession, I think this is actually kind of relevant. Now in my profession, you know, I see it more so than anything else. You know, so some of my investors, some of my LPs are professional athletes, but I also have, you know, owners of sports teams that are LPs as well. And it sucks because if you talk to some of those athletes, they get kind of made fun of, if you will, because they're so entrepreneurial minded. And the reason they want to do more of this stuff is because they felt the same way I felt in high school. They felt like America puts them in this bubble. And so one of our guys is a well-known Dallas Cowboy. He gets destroyed because he's so, you know, entrepreneurial. And it's like America wants him to be a certain way. And so anyway, that's kind of been my relation as it relates to sports.
That's incredible. I think that what I'm hearing from both of you is that, you know, you're almost forced into living a stereotype, right? You know, I heard from Batuli, you know, be who you are, but don't act Muslim, or don't let that shine through. The similar situations that you were put into, Marcus, it's almost like you can't experience the full version of yourself publicly, or that you're not going to be accepted. And that's incredibly heartbreaking. Rebecca, I think even from an identity perspective and having moved from a small town to, you know, small college town in Lawrence, Kansas, what was the transition like for you, especially as it relates to diversity?
It was a culture shock for me, and I think it taught me so many important lessons along the way. Before I came to Kansas, I had never personally known someone who was from a different race, religion, or sexual orientation. And when I got to Kansas, almost every single one of my teammates met one or more of those categories. And so I think coming in, I was really fortunate in that I was raised in a household where my dad's, one of his favorite phrases is, it takes all kinds of people to make a world. So that was always his response whenever I wanted to complain about anyone, you know, well, it takes all kinds of people to make a world. So I think I came in, obviously with the biases and prejudices and privilege that society, you know, has impacted for anyone living in the world. But I definitely came in, I think, with a lack of a lot of conscious expectations, which was a gift. I think it was the closest thing to a blank slate that I could have had. But one of the most immediate, I think, lessons that I learned over and over again was the experience of getting as close to an understanding as possible as a white person to what it was like to be one of my teammates who were Black. One of the first gatherings I ever went to, it was all athletes, and just the way that it worked out for who attended, myself and one of my other teammates were the only white people there. And I didn't know how to act because I had just never been in that situation. And what I learned from that was the experience of what it is like for some of my teammates who, outside of our locker room, had that experience almost exclusively being at Kansas. Almost every classroom, almost every time they go to a restaurant, you know, maybe, you know, different situations they've been in off campus or even back home. But just depending on their environment, you know, that's something that they've had to learn how to navigate every day for most of their lives. And so it was just like earth shattering to me because I had never been in any sort of situation like that. And I think the second thing that was so important about the transition was being able to have close personal relationships and things in common, and a real love for people who have such a different experience from me, where it took the experience of race and issues around racism from something that was more of an academic exercise or something I had heard about on the news and maybe thought about at a high level, and made it very visceral because it was through the experiences of people that I cared about. And they would either tell me stories or I would witness things in their presence that would help me understand, I think, at a deeper level what it was like. And I think that was so invaluable. And I wish that there was a way in society for everyone to get that kind of experience, not just along things like race, but along issues of class, along issues of citizenship status, all the different types of privilege. Because without that close personal relationship, I don't think it's quite possible to form the empathy that you need to really move forward as a society.
Wow, how incredibly well said. Lived experience and empathy as a result. We could all learn. I think that sticking with college sports for a moment and segueing to talking about the influence that athletes have on our society is a great transition. So Marcus, I'll start with you for this next question. According to a recent RISE survey featured by ESPN of more than 6,000 college athletes and more than 1,000 college coaches, greater than 90% of respondents said racism is a concerning issue in the United States. The same survey noted that 84% of college athletes said they're willing to speak up more often about social issues, and 78% of which said they feel obligated to raise awareness around social justice issues. Today, athletes of all ages and skill levels have embraced their role as social influencers both locally and globally. They're advocating for equal opportunity and for the entire Black community. So my question is, talk to us about your thoughts regarding the current racial equity movement and how athletes have played a central role in spreading this message far and wide.
Yeah, I think, seeing how the WNBA and NBA in particular have just kind of leveraged their platforms to, spread awareness about social justice and spread awareness about the victims, of like police brutality it's been incredible. And I know a lot of society is giving pushback to that, but it's like, that's exactly the goal, in my opinion, of sports. It's to show the world that I am more than just an athlete and I am a person. And by hurting me, by hurting them, you're hurting me as well. And so I think for me, I look no further than LeBron James. And now it's like I told you guys before, like I'm the world's biggest LeBron fan. So, whatever, I'll get some hate from the Jordan fans, but, what he has done, what he has said has just been instrumental. And I think, a tangible example, more than just kind of what he did in the bubble and what his teammates in the bubble, is what he did with I Promise School. Using his platform to create this school that provides, housing for mothers who can't afford it, that provides foods for families that can't pay for it, who provides a free college, education to kids who graduate from that school. It's just so unbelievable. And so it's like, to see the power of an athlete to use his platform to do something like that, it's just so crazy to me. And it's just beautiful. And it just goes to show that, like, athletes have a chance to be the most powerful construct in this country when we work together towards a common goal. I say we as if I'm a part of that world. I'm just saying we in general, supporting that cause. But yeah.
One team, one voice, right, Marcus?
Yeah.
So, Batulu, anxious to hear your thoughts on this question as well.
I just would say we are all athletes to start there, and we all have a unique platform at a certain time or space, wherever it is, at the high school level, college level, or now professional level. And I would say it is just so empowering to see athletes, use their platform the way that they are, and really, again, echoing sentiments of the WNBA and everything that it stands for, which is just equality, period. And they are exemplifying it in an incredible way. And I would say the time is now. Sports is a microcosm for the world that we live in, and the things and the daily things that we go through. And once you step outside of that, bubble or step outside of that court, you are who you are, and you go back to that. And I think the beautiful things about sport and through my studies is, whatever is happening in society can be reflected on the court, and that can be where we build peace. That can be where we build community. That can be where, as Rebecca said, we have these commonalities where the walls fall, and now this is a human level. This is a person to me, and having that shared experience. So I would say there's no better place in sport. As you look back throughout time, even before Ali, sport has always been a platform and a unique space for change on a global level.
Could not agree more. Rebecca, what are your thoughts?
And Marcus and Batuli just absolutely nailed it. I am happy to add a few thoughts, or Brian, if you want to keep moving too. I think they almost said it all.
All right. Couldn't agree more. So I'm personally amazed by all the incredible and impactful work that all of you are doing for and with your communities, again, both locally and around the globe. You're all influencers in your own right. So let's start with Batuli for this next question. We talk with our Trey athletes about how no one just knows how to engage in community volunteer work. And oftentimes there's someone who helps introduce and coach you through it. Who helped show you how to get involved in community service, and what was that experience like for you?
I would say, as a first generation growing up in New York, I always learned history lessons before fun facts. And that was constantly my mom, as a single mom, trying to raise 4 kids in New York, but instilling a deep sense of connectedness and rootedness for where we came from and who we were and why she came here and the sacrifices she made. And it was kind of in this moment where I remember in our neighborhood, we grew up in low income houses, and she would go out, and one time she was parking the car, really late parking, and 2 kids were fighting, and one of them pulled a weapon, and she stood right in front. And I'm just like, oh my God, why would you do that? Like, how could you do that? Like, please don't do that. And we were all there. And to her, it's kind of this, Ubuntu, I am because we are. And in that moment, she's like, I'm a mother and this is what I stand for. And she has done that time and time again. And I'm just like, it makes me emotional because it never, people always say you're giving back. And I'm saying, no, I'm giving in. I'm pouring into myself, and that is a reflection of the world I want to live in and manifest in the community I want my children to live in. And it's bigger than me, and it takes a village, and that is where she came from, and that is what she brought to New York. And it constantly made me feel like this work I am here to do. One of the first questions my professor asked me is, are you willing to fight for change you may never see happen? And I saw my mom get up every day and do that, not knowing what tomorrow would lead to, but saying, I have this day. And I can make the most of it. And it was so empowering. And so when I do this work, I may never see it complete, but I can say I didn't invent the wheel, but I did my part to keep it spinning where I see fit. And that is the most important thing for me in the way I live my life. So I would have to say my mom's the MVP. She's the MVP.
Just like KD would say, right?
I love your mom, man. I don't even know her. I love your mom, man. I don't even know her.
Everyone says that. They meet me, they meet my mom, and they're like, yeah, I don't like you anymore. I'm like, that's every college coach. I'm like, my goodness.
I think that what you described is really powerful, though, right? Because communities come out to support athletes at their games. And as an athlete, being able to pour back into your community and see that positive change created in real time is incredibly powerful. Marcus, what's your experience been like in that capacity?
I think, similar to Tilly, growing up with a single mother and, just thinking about the village that helped raise me was kind of what made me know that, it was never a person in particular that said, hey, you need to give back or you need to give in. And Julie said, which I like more. It was more so that, man, I've been afforded a lot of privilege and a lot of opportunity by virtue of the village that's kind of helping raise my brothers and I alongside my mother. So if I'm ever in a position one day, or if I ever have a platform to help give in and help take things to the next level, then I have a responsibility, and it's not a responsibility you just kind of do, whatever, this is just something I'm doing to feel good. It's like, no, this is to whom much is given, much is required. And I just think back to those days when, we had the lights off, or we, were getting evicted, and I had friends outside helping us move. And I just think back to those moments. I think about, all the parents that would send me care packages in college, or my friends' parents who would come to my games in college because they knew my mom couldn't really afford to come up there. And I'm just like, man, I have that responsibility to help that next generation any way I can, regardless of how big my platform is or isn't. So that's kind of, I guess, where my heart for community truly comes from.
I mean, you're the Spider-Man of our panel for sure, right? With great power comes great responsibility. So could not agree more. So we're closing down on the last 5 minutes or so of our conversation. So Rebecca, I'm going to give you a different question, and Marcus, anxious to hear your response as well before we close out. So, you know, I guess all of the good work that was made possible because of your huge hearts and your unparalleled accomplishments through basketball and football. What's amazing to us at Trey Athletes is you go to a Mavericks, Cowboys, or Wings game here in Dallas, and it doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, gay or straight, black or white or brown. Sports, and more specifically athletes like you, bring people together. Could you talk to us about your experiences with the unifying power and the positive influence of sports on communities everywhere, and how athletes can realize that power in order to raise awareness and create positive change?
That is a good question. I think I would start by saying that I think the frame matters a lot. And I think for athletes to realize that doing good makes you feel good, that is key. You know, being part of a community and contributing to that community makes you feel good too, and it gives your life purpose. And I think for athletes, that's especially important, not only so that they really engage in the work that in the community that matters most to them. You know, don't make it a photo op. Don't check a box. Pick something that you really care about and really dig deep in it, in however you can, and use your talents to do that. But also, I think it could help athletes get around a really common problem, which is focusing so intensely on their sport that their entire identity becomes melded to it. And that's so damaging, because when you're not successful athletically, you don't get to play. When you get an injury, when your sport eventually ends, and it always ends, you have nothing left. Whereas if you view your platform as an athlete as kind of your means of transportation rather than your destination, and I think if you're really involved in the community along the way, then your purpose can continue even after your competitive athletic days are over. Like Batuli said, we're all athletes, and you don't stop being an athlete just because you stop competing. And so I think that is a real key for athletes to focus on. And I think staying really close to the work itself to see the impact on the community. And I guess the other thing is athletes taking a stand the way they have more recently. You know, the Kansas women's basketball team organized a Black Lives Matter march on campus for students, and it had a huge turnout recently. That would have never happened when I was playing, even just, you know, over a decade ago. And so I think that's such an important thing, because athletes are the bridge. They are that empathy and that connection, not just between each other, but between the fans. And that's something that I think is so encouraging and really needs to continue, because sports is so unifying and because people can rally together around a team and around a group of athletes.
Wow. So Marcus and Batuli, we're gonna do a little speed round here. So 30 seconds each before we sign off. Marcus, what's the role of sports here in Texas?
The role of sports here in Texas, to echo what Rebecca said, you know, doing good will always make you feel good. You know, the touchdowns are going to stop, the 20-point games are going to stop, all that's going to stop, you know, but doing good and making the world a better place is going to always make you feel better. And so I think the role of sports here, we set the tone. We're the best football state in the country. We have some of the most influential franchises like the Cowboys and the Mavericks. I think the more we can show a unified force, the more we can demonstrate a better example for the country, especially in a state like Texas.
Couldn't agree more. Batuli, same question, but for you, what is the role of sports globally?
The role of sports globally is to unite us as one through a common language that is not seen anywhere else on any other platform. So sport is the unifier. Sport, like you said, Rebecca, is the bridge.
Wow. And with that, our Q&A has now come to a close. Batuli, Marcus, and Rebecca, you continue to prove time and again why athletes continue to excel both on and off the court or field. On behalf of bigBANG and every single one of our Trey athletes and families, thank you so much for joining us today. And for those interested, check out our work at treyathletes.org or follow our social media at Trey Athletes. Until next time, to athletes everywhere.
Yes.